Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pro Wrestling Inside Now. This is the best moments in wrestling, part 3. You know, there's so many greats, and I'm gonna take. Most of mine was the territory days, but I'm gonna go a little further into WWE because at the time WWF, they did so many great things. In the wrestling business, and we may have talked about this before. I'm not for sure, but did we talk about Hulk Hogan becoming part of the NWO and turning heel? Did we talk about that in any of our part 1 or 2?
I don't think so.
To me, that was a great moment in wrestling when he made that turn and people threw that stuff in the ring. That was real heat, and people said you couldn't even get it back in those days. But that was what, 1996
I think so.
when he did that. I mean, this was at least 4 or 5 years after Vince told everybody that it was a show, and that it generated that much emotion. That's a great moment and one of the best moments in wrestling. Jack, what do you think about that actual moment that he came out, made the turn, and became?
I think that was the biggest pivotal point in the history of WCW. Everything changed for them from that point on, and it also rejuvenated Hogan's career
Yeah,
because even though he was a huge name for the company, the biggest name there, still wasn't drawing for him. Not like
yeah.
he should have been. Uh, but it changed the way fans looked at wrestling too. It got them talking. I mean, how many times could you could go to anywhere and see NWO shirts out there?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
Kmart sold them. That's where I bought mine at. So it was a huge deal.
Rodney, Hulk Hogan becoming part of the NWO. Would that have got over without Hulk Hogan?
No, no, it would have been dead on arrival. Hogan is the one that made it. That
Yep.
turn was absolutely perfect. If they would have tried to do it with anybody else, it would have been ended up like many of the other things that they have done. Most recently, WWE tried some reveal that ended up dead on arrival. But this Hogan made it. Hogan made it. He gave it the intention that it needed. Up to that point, it was kind of watchable, but he's the one that put it over the finish line and made it what it is or what it was.
Well, while we're on that subject, before I ask y'all about but do you believe the way they just got Hall and Kevin Nash was also the way they brought them in was one of the best moments in wrestling? Just the way they did it.
I think the way they did it was good. Um, I don't think they could have. I don't think they had longevity though. If it not had been for Hogan joining that, and changing the dynamic of it, them as a tag team, I don't, they could have played that up for a little while, uh, but the NWO, as we knew it, never would have worked with anybody else, and it never would have lasted without Hogan being there.
They were talk that Sting was going to be the person if Hogan wouldn't come in. I believe that would have been horrible for
Yeah.
for it. I think that would have backfired on him, no doubt. All right, Rodney, best moments in wrestling.
I'm going to go with one that our father Ron West put together in Chattanooga, Tennessee. It lasted for a very long time, and I'm talking about the feud with Buzz Sawyer and Tommy Rich. Started on the stage of the Memorial Auditorium here in Chattanooga, and it set the world on fire, basically, and it went on for years and years while Ole was criticizing it and saying it was bad, and then the very moment he fires Dad, and then he takes everything that he did from Chattanooga and Augusta and all the other places and put it together as a package and re-showed it on TBS and then used it on a national level. It was true one of the great rivalries in wrestling, and it all started with my father, Tommy Rich and Buzz Sawyer in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
And our father Ron West does not get any credit for the Buzz Sawyer Tommy Rich feud. I don't even know if Tommy Rich even talks about him and gives him the credit. But without him, they would not have ever put Buzz Sawyer The only reason he was there because they wouldn't send him to Ohio because he got in trouble so many times, and they didn't want to pay for all these rental cars and stuff. They'd rather Tommy mess his own car up, and so they let him. They made him work the local territory, and it started drawing. Tommy Rich, Buzz Sawyer drew some great houses in Chattanooga, Augusta. I'm not for sure Columbus was.
Columbus. I think they did it in Columbus too.
I know that
much to the chagrin of Fred Ward, but he did it.
But great stuff, Tommy Rich, Buzz Sawyer. One of the best things that was ever done is Buzz Sawyer. Tommy Rich does not show up. Tommy Rich does not show up. You don't see where Tommy Rich is. All at once, Tommy Rich comes in. I think Buzz Sawyer came in first, didn't he?
Yes.
Buzz Sawyer came in laughing, but all his shirt tore and him busted up a little bit, and he's laughing. And he actually goes to the dressing room. And then about 10 minutes later, here comes Tommy Rich in there, and he's all busted up and bleeding. And he goes in there and gets Buzz Sawyer out of the dressing room. They have a big fight. They fight all over the building, which set up for a cage escape match. One of the first that George ever had, a cage escape match for Tommy Rich and Buzz Sawyer. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Chick Donovan was involved in that match.
Chick Donovan and Don Morocco was also involved.
And that, do you remember Chick Donovan threw the brass nuts or something into Buzz, and Tommy got it, hit him with it, and then Buzz beat up Chick Donovan at the end of that match. So it was pretty good stuff. It was good storytelling back in those days. They knew what they were doing back then. So Jack, Buzz Sawyer, and Tommy Rich.
Oh, I loved it. And WWE came out and has the last Battle of Atlanta on the network now on Peacock. I believe it's maybe 2 years now it's been on there. But it's the entire card. And there's no commentary over. You just get to see it like a fan saw it. And it's spectacular. Great match. The whole card's great. Our buddy Pat Rose was opening match on that card.
Well, we won't say anything bad about Pat on that then. So since he was,
but yeah, tremendous matches. I mean, I was in Germany at the time, so I didn't get to see any of that live, but I read about it. Sure did. Knew everything was going on back there.
All right, Jack. Best moments in wrestling.
My best moment is you can nail it to one particular moment, but it spanned an era and started the golden age of pro wrestling. In 1942, December the 18th, WRBG TV in Schenectady, New York, aired the first professional wrestling program. Now, not a lot of TVs at that time nationwide, but it grew from there. And by the late 40s, the DuPont network saw the potential, and they started putting it on, and they owned a lot of stations all over the United States, and it just grew from there. That was the biggest key to bringing professional wrestling to the masses, but it also brought in that era of the showmanship. And that's really what took us off. It was cheap programming for DuPont and all those other stations, but it really, it snowballed huge to what we see now. Now, that was not, just as a by note, that was not the first televised match, but it was the first televised match in America. The first televised match actually happened in England on March the 12th, my birthday, 1938, just about a year before I was born. But that was the first televised match in history was in England. So just a few years later, somebody picked up the idea in America and ran with
it. People talk about a renaissance in wrestling. There's never been. It was popular back in the 1900s. It was popular in the early 1900s. So wrestling was never just popular in 1998 to 96, 98 during the Attitude Era. It was popular. It has been popular for years. I mean, look at it today. It's still a popular form of entertainment. on television. It just is. It still has high numbers. All right, I gotta talk about and we talked about this earlier. The Montreal Screwjob, I think was a great moment. It was one of the best moments in wrestling, regardless if it's a work, regardless if it was a shoot, regardless of what it was. It was great storytelling afterwards. And that's what set WWE on fire, or WWF at the time, on fire, and Vince McMahon became the hated individual out of this thing. Rodney, did that change WWF? Was that what made Steve Austin the star he is?
It absolutely did. And you're right, it did change WWE, and it was actually the end of an era for WWE, because at that point the shades of gray nonsense began, and they still are deep into up to their necks in that. So, but yeah, it was huge, and it actually was the reason they finally overtook WCW again. Because Vince McMahon put himself in a position that he had never been in before, and then he had an equally charismatic, competitor in Steve Austin, and it just made for television gold.
Here's the thing. I've got to ask this question. People believe that it was the crash booking, basically, that was done by Vince Russo. But that is not the reason people watched the show. They watched the show because Steve Austin was over so tremendously. It had nothing to do with all the other stuff they were doing. People tuned in to see what Steve Austin was going to do. That was a turning point. Jack, Montreal Screwjob was the beginning. What is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it changed, whether shoot, work, whatever, but it changed the whole dynamic of WWE, WWF at the time. It changed the whole dynamic of their show. They went from the kiddie stuff to the more adult natured stuff, which really, in the end, won them all those ratings. So yeah, it was a pivotal part of their history. Now, was it accidental? Whatever, that's debatable and will be for the rest of time. The point is that Vince was smart enough to know how to turn that into a positive for him. Even if he did get smacked for real, Vince came back swinging in his own way.
Yeah, and it was. I think it was a tremendous turning point in wrestling, and I think that it's even to this, because how many years ago was that at this point? But people still talk about it. 20 some odd years ago,
yeah.
And still people talk about it.
25 years, I think. So.
It's okay. Now is it Rodney's time or was it no? I guess it was Rodney's. All right, go ahead, Rodney.
There are several turns in wrestling that made a difference and changed everything and made superstars. One, of course, Dusty Rhodes changing in Florida, but another one here in Tennessee in our area was the turning of Jackie Fargo in Chattanooga. This made Jackie Fargo into a household name all across the Southeast and one of the great superstars of our time. Right at the night, my father Ron West was there, and he and Nick was talking. He said, when I do this, I will never turn back. So make sure this is exactly what you want to do, because I will never turn back. And he was right. Jackie was absolutely right. And on that night was the birth of one of the great superstars of that time. And still to this day, people are talking about Jackie Fargo.
That Jackie was he was the most hated wrestler in this area for years. So when they turned him, that's what made him, because number one, he didn't change. He was still the same Jackie Fargo that he was when he was the bad guy. He would still hit you with some brass nuts. He would still do the nasty stuff. He still did everything. I think a lot of times in wrestling, people changed. Buzz Sawyer did when he turned. I don't know why, but he did. He just was a nice guy at that point. I don't understand. How do you just change all at once? So Jackie Fargo didn't. Jackie Fargo turning. What year was that, Rodney? Do you know?
I'm going to say 68. It may be earlier than that. I'm thinking it was 68. It might have been earlier than that. It might have been 66.
Was
But
you
I don't.
watching when Jackie Fargo? Was you watching Chattanooga TV when Jackie Fargo
I
started?
sure was. In fact, I remember being there watching that with my grandfather, who was the one who turned me on to professional wrestling. Since before I could even walk, and he hated Jackie Fargo. But I'm telling you, from that moment forward, it was like I, I don't pardon my words here, but it was like the second coming because from that moment, he loved Jackie Fargo with everything he had, which in turn made me love him too. And as a matter of fact, how deeply ingrained that was about how you talked about how his style never changed. He went from the most hated guy there to the most loved guy, but his style never changed. Is exactly what I emulated during my career because I thought all those years later, if it worked for him, it'll work for me, and it did.
And you shouldn't change. If you're a bad guy to begin with, you should always be a bad guy. That's what would get you over to begin with. Yeah, Jackie Fargo, tremendous. All right, Jack, best moments in wrestling.
I'm moving forward a few years. I had a golden age reference. Now we're going to talk about the where WWF proved inadvertently how much better they were. And that was when, on a pre taped episode, Mankind beat The Rock for the WWF Championship. And at the inadvertent urging of Tony Schiavone, who said, Mankind wins the world title. Who wants to see that? More or less. And everybody wanted to see that because they severely underestimated how many people loved and respected Mick Foley. And that, from that point on, WWF never looked back. They trounced from that night on, and WCW was just a puff in the wind from that point on.
Rodney, what do you think about that? What Tony Schiavone kind of helped him. I mean, let's just be honest.
Inadvertently, certainly, and I've heard he was told to say that. So, but yeah, ooh.
The greatest misstep that has ever been. And this is what we go back to. We've talked about over and over again. You do not talk about your competition on your show in any way, shape, or form. You don't even acknowledge them. And with that acknowledgement, they're saying, do what? And people were turning the channel. Stupidest move that's ever been.
Well, we're gonna talk about one more thing and when we talk about The Rock and we talk about Mick Foley, one of the greatest things he ever did and one of the highest rated segments they ever did on Monday Night Raw was "This Is Your Life" with The Rock. Tremendous. They talk about comedy, but that was a different type of comedy. It was getting The Rock over in a major way, and at the same time getting Mick Foley over. And the thing is, it was supposedly supposed to get Rock over, but it actually helped get Mick Foley over even more by doing that. I think that's where Sacco was invented on that particular.
Well, Sacco came to be the first time with the hospital deal with Vince. Now, I can't remember my dates, but I think Sacco became a part of the program that night inadvertently because I remember reading that Vince or Mick saying that they came to him and said, "Hey, you got Sacco with you tonight?" And he was like, "Well, no, that was just a joke." And he said, "Well, we're going to make you some Saccos because Vince thought that was great."
They probably sold a bunch of those. Did they sell those? Did they have like Sacco things that they sold?
I think so.
But just if you go back and watch, if you've not seen it, it's available. I'm pretty sure on the Peacock Network or YouTube. Go see it on the Peacock Network if you can. But it is one of the greatest moments in wrestling, I think, because it was done in such a way that it got what they wanted to do over. And let's give all the credit. And I think the credit has to go to Vince Russo. He wrote a lot of the stuff that was done on that particular. We might not like Vince Russo, but I believe he did write part of that stuff. It was great stuff for the time and for The Rock, but it wouldn't have got over if it wasn't for The Rock. They couldn't have done that. Do you think you could have done that with anybody else and they got over?
No.
Didn't they try it later on with other people? And it fell flat, as we say. I think they did it maybe years later and tried it again. You can't never go back and do it again.
That was just pure magic. The writing was great. Characters were there, but more than importantly, the people were hungry for that.
Yeah, they were wanting The Rock. They didn't care what he did. They were ready for The Rock to do whatever. All right, we're running out of time. I want to thank each and every one of you for being a part of Pro Wrestling Inside Now. We hope you enjoyed this video. Before we leave, we'll talk to the insiders and see if they've got anything to talk about as it goes to great moments in wrestling. Let's see. Just checked in. Hello. Michael Barr said he agrees. NWO was made by Hulk Hogan. I like the idea of the different colors of the NWO, as in Sting in red. I think they had too many NWOs by then.
Yeah, I think they what's that phrase? Jump the shark. They definitely jumped the shark with it. But initially, it was huge. It was great. I think they lost too much focus on it.
Michael said, Richard Hood said, Michael, I agree. Hulk Hogan pulled it off. Michael Barr, Ron West should have gotten the credit. He was one of the best referees in kayfabe wrestling. The Rich and Sawyer feud was a bloodbath. Yes, it was. They lost a lot of blood during that time.
Let's be honest. Tommy would get color going to the Coke machine.
That's right. It's true.
Buzz could work. Yes, he could. The Buzz was very good. Jack Brenton Rodney, who wrote the lines for CCW and Southeastern Championship Wrestling? Who wrote the lines? What is he talking about?
I guess
I would say that he's coming up with the ideas, that there were no lines and there were nothing written. Basically, ideas came from Ron Fuller, Robert Fuller, Jimmy Golden, Bob Armstrong, and Roy Lee Welch. There were some people who helped. Jody Hamilton helped, Dutch Mantell, Ron West, all helped out. And the wrestlers contributed in very big ways when they came in as well.
Yeah, because they got to come up with the Nightmares took care of most of all their stuff that they did. They came up with some good stuff. That was the Tommy Rich, Johnny Rich feud with the Nightmares was spectacular. Biggest failure that should have been a great moment. Harley Race versus Superstar Billy Graham to unify the title. Yes.
Yeah. That was a disaster.
We're at the same place every week, Victor. That was the thing. We were at the same place. Now, after this week, we will only be going live for 2 hours on Tuesday nights. So make sure you know that every Tuesday night for 2 hours. Vern and Jim Barnett started Wrestling Debut Network. Yes, Jim Barnett was, I don't know if people really realize how much Jim Barnett was, so much. He had so much to do with wrestling. He was actually the first person that did studio wrestling, so it could be cheaper. One of my favorites in Dothan way back when the lumberjack match was at the Farm Center. Wrestlers around the ring and throwing the two wrestlers back into the ring. Did they ever have lumberjack matches anymore?
Yes.
They're great now and then.
Do they do it correctly?
No, they do not.
Just like a street fight, they don't do that correctly.
They had a street fight here not too long ago on WWE programming, and everybody wearing their gear.
Sad. Very sad.
The Montreal Screwjob changed the whole outlook on wrestling for the WWE Alf at the time, and it was said while watching TV, not for others underage at halftime. Yeah, that was, and our father always said wrestling shouldn't be designed for kids. It should be all right for the kids to come to the matches, but it shouldn't be designed for them. And he never really believed in comedy and wrestling or any kind of kiddie deal. He wanted it to be an athletic contest with some violence. That's just all there is to it. When Ole turned against Dusty,
yes,
that was a tremendous moment, but did not draw the money they thought it was going to draw. And we've talked about that before. I think they just made Dusty look bad. I think they just made him look. I mean, he got in the ring with everybody that beat him up at some point in his career. Every one of them people did. So I think it made him look bad. I think I don't think Dusty ever recovered from that in Georgia. I really don't. Rick Brooks. I recently seen an old Portland Territory match with Buzz where he called himself Buzzsaw King or Buzzsaw King. Y'all ever see that?
I have not seen it. I know he was there and got over big in Portland.
He said Mick sells autograph sockos, and he does it, Brian.
Brian says he doesn't have one, but he does not say he doesn't have a matching set.
Let's see. Michael Barr, was it true that wrestlers got busted over the head in Untitled Chapter wrestling? Who, by fans? Yes. Many times by fans, but and they they may have did the hard way back in those days too. So I don't know from the other wrestlers, but guys, when was the first studio match? It was sometime in the 50s, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And I think Jim Barnett is the one that did it. I'm pretty sure. We'll have to look that up to make sure.
Yeah, that would be a whole show in itself about the history of TV.
All right, folks, insiders, remember, next week we will not be going live on Monday. We're only going to go live on Tuesdays from 7:30 Eastern Standard Time to 9:30. And that will be each and every week throughout till to about March, with Thanksgiving coming up, with Christmas coming up and all that. A lot of people are not going to have a lot of time, so we will do 2 hours on Tuesdays. Great question and answer show, Jack. What channel will the 2 hour? Oh, it'll be right exactly on here, exactly where you're at. It will be on YouTube and Facebook. It'll be exactly where you're at each and every week. And I will be I'll be messaging everybody to let everybody know about that. All right, guys. Thank y'all so much. Thank you. If you enjoyed this video, give us the big thumbs up. Subscribe to the video. Go one step further. Hit that notification bell. I forgot my whole deal. What was the other thing? Oh, share the video and watch the video. It's on this side somewhere. One of these sides. There'll be a video down here.
It's not up here.
Much. And we'll see you in the next video right here on Pro Wrestling Inside Now.